The gospel passage today describes one of the many post-resurrection, pre-ascension appearances of Jesus that raise so many questions in the minds of those who struggle with the mystery of faith. Over the last couple of Sundays, we've heard that Jesus appeared through solid and locked doors. He appeared in widely separated locations all at the same time. He revealed gaping wounds in his hands and his side. He ate physical food. And today, he even had the recognition of his face from two disciples from among those who knew him best. Jesus had clearly adopted a whole new physical and chronological dimension. But why are these appearances, these narratives, so difficult for us to accept? If you were trying to find a way to describe something so far outside your current frame of reference, when you had absolutely no idea of what was happening, where would you start? A few days ago at 8:07 local time in the evening, the International Space Station passed overhead in Invercargill. How many of you knew that? Who would have bothered to look for it if you did? How fast was it travelling? Who can tell me how big it is or how far off the surface of the Earth the International Space Station is? How heavy is it? How would we go about describing how big it is to someone else who hasn't seen it? How many football fields or swimming pools? How would we even start to think about its relevance to our lives and the future of humanity? Many of us probably think that science has revealed many of the world's mysteries in the last 2,000 years or so, and that therefore we ask better, more complicated questions than first century Jews might have. But we probably still struggle with the sheer physical mechanics and dynamics of these post-resurrection stories. How could Jesus be solid 1 minute and simply disappear the next, or pass through a door the next? How could he physically be in more than one place at the same time? The writers must have missed something, or they must be wrong. Time and space simply don't work that way. The disciples must have seen a series of visions, or they were hallucinating. If Jesus was a man, his body simply must obey the rules of nature. But Luke here tells us specifically that Jesus wasn't a ghost. Luke describes the angel as a vision, but Jesus was physically present. Ghosts don't have flesh and bones that they could be seen, that they could see he had. And ghosts don't eat broiled fish. How many disciples have to make mistakes on how many occasions before scientists concede that the disciples might have had a point? Even if we can't be sure whether Thomas actually put his hands in those wounds or not, Jesus offered him the opportunity to do so. Jesus was physically present, and then he wasn't. The whole point is that these aren't issues of paranormal disturbance or metaphysical complexity. They aren't magic. This way of thinking only accounts for his time as a human. After he defeated death and was resurrected from the tomb, Jesus was more than that, and he still is. The events of these days simply defy human understanding. They remain a mystery for now. We are promised that there will come a time when we will understand in perfect clarity, just as those two disciples on the road to Emmaus had the truth of the scriptures explained to them, beginning with Moses and the prophets. But even they didn't recognize Jesus until, sitting at the table, sharing bread with them, their eyes were opened, they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. Each of us too will experience a progressive revelation of the truth as we need from time to time in order to walk our own path. Perhaps this is why when we try to describe spiritual things to those who don't share our views, our words sometimes fails us. We struggle to make the right mental connections or find the right metaphors. If we're talking to friends, sharing our innermost thoughts, it's easier because we know we are trusted. We know that if we come up against something we can't describe, we can just try to do our best and we won't be laughed from the room. Our friends help us and share their own experience or wisdom, and we learn collectively by doing so. There will always be skeptics, those who seem to wait in the wings, short on faith and long on human wisdom. God loves them too. Leave them to him until the right time. It might just be that they are having the hardest time. It might be them that needs us most, but not yet. Now, I guess it's the same when we're trying to make a new vaccine to beat the latest virus. How can we be sure that the effect that we observe in the lab is the only result of exactly and only the cause that we've tried to generate, and not some other effect that we haven't tracked because we haven't observed it yet? How can we know that this result will always deliver exactly and only the outcome we've seen on this occasion? Even virologists, with all their experience, struggle with proof sometimes. Often the experts disagree with one another. It's no different for us. We make the best guess we can, and we accept that sometimes we can't, at the moment, know everything for sure. We make approximations based on what we think we know, and we accept the rest on faith. The two disciples who travelled with Jesus on the road to Emmaus that day were so sure after dinner that evening that everything that they braved the difficult and dangerous 7 miles back to Jerusalem by night to find the upper room and reveal their truth, only to discover that Peter had also seen him at the same time. From one moment of absolute certainty of truth to another of sheer confusion and joy. The International Space Station is currently the largest object we have put into space. It is over a football field long and has roughly the same internal volume as a jumbo jet. Using these words, it starts to make sense, but it doesn't help us understand why it is important. A friend of mine took a picture of it as it passed over his house in Canberra 5 minutes before it arrived overhead in Chicago. That starts to make sense of the fact that we can say that it travels at 5 miles a second. But without these comparisons, we are just making sounds in the ether. Think of how hard it must have been for the disciples who were trying to make sense of this new Jesus after his resurrection, without the framework of quantum physics and a well-defined Christian soteriology to help them out. On second thoughts, no, don't bother. Let's just accept it on faith and love our neighbours the best we can. Amen.